Okay, this is Officer Daniel Hodges on the day that he just described. Hard to listen to, isn't it? It's hard to watch. That was 53 seconds. 53 seconds. And it was hard to listen to and it was hard to watch. 53 seconds. This went on for hours. For hours, this insurrection. For hours, this terrorism. For hours, this violence at the Capitol, with an eye towards hunting down and killing Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. And they say there's no bipartisanship here in this here country. Huh. All right, here's Officer Harry Dunn. He's testifying about, the flagpole beatings.
I was stunned by what I saw. In what seemed like a sea of people, Capitol police officers and Metropolitan police officers, MPD, were engaged in desperate hand-to-hand fighting with rioters across the West Lawn. Until then, I had never seen anyone physically assault Capitol Police or MPD, let alone witness mass assaults being perpetrated on law enforcement officers. I witnessed the rioters using all kinds of weapons against officers, including flagpoles, metal bike racks that they had torn apart, and various kinds of projectiles. Officers were being bloodied in the fighting. Many were screaming, and many were blinded and coughing from chemical irritants being sprayed in their faces. I gave decontamination aid to as many officers as I could, flushing their eyes with water to dilute the chemical irritants. Soon thereafter, I heard, "Attention all units, the Capitol has been breached," and that rioters were in various places inside the building. At that point, I rushed into the Capitol with another officer, going first to the basement on the Senate side, where I'd heard an MPD officer needed a defibrillator. After returning outside to the West Terrace to assist officers, I went back into the Capitol and up the stairs towards the crypt. There I saw rioters who had invaded the Capitol carrying a Confederate flag, a red MAGA flag, and a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. I decided to stand my ground there to prevent any rioters from heading down the stairs to the Lower West Terrace entrance, because that's where officers were getting decontamination aid and were particularly vulnerable. At the top of the stairs, I confronted a group of insurrectionists, warning them do not go down those steps. One of them shouted, "Keep moving, patriots."
Oh, good God. All right, and this is the most vile testimony that you're about to hear. I'm warning you now. It's pretty ugly. It's really raw. It's typical of Trump supporters. It's shocking, but it's not surprising, but it's awful.
I told them to just leave the Capitol, and in response they yelled, "No, man, this is our house. President Trump invited us here.
Huh.
We're here to stop the steal. Joe Biden is not the president. Nobody voted for Joe Biden. I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded, well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?" That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, You hear that, guys? This nigger voted for Joe Biden. Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo, f***ing nigger." No one had ever called me a nigger while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer. In the days following the attempted insurrection, other black officers shared with me their own stories of racial abuse on January 6th. One officer told me he had never, and in his entire 40 years of life, been called a nigger to his face, and that streak ended on January 6th. Yet another black officer later told me he had been confronted by insurrectionists in the Capitol who told him, "Put your gun down and we'll show you what kind of nigger you really are." To be candid, the rest of the afternoon is a blur.
His entire career, he's never heard that word being thrown at him, except for Trump supporters. Poor Harry. I gotta say, this is just, like I said, it's shocking, but it's not surprising. You know who they are. They're white supremacists, and they are literally terrified and resentful and angry and full of hatred for everybody that isn't them. And Republicans know this. And they are exploiting those feelings, encouraging those feelings, manifesting those feelings, giving permission to those feelings to those people for their benefit. It's all they have. All that's left of the Republican Party is anger, hatred, and resentment. That is all they have to offer. And people who are in the thick of those feelings can't see their way to a better place. And so they just sit there and ferment in it. But Donald Trump is so slick that he literally told Carol Leonnig and Phil Rucker when they were interviewing him in Mar-a-Lago for their book, I Alone Can Fix It, that it was a very loving crowd. What he means is they loved him enough to die for him. They loved him enough to be violent for him. They loved him enough to be ugly for him, to be racist for him. He gave them permission to be this way. He gave them permission to be violent. He gave them permission to be angry. He gave them permission to be full of rage and hatred. He told them they are victims of a swamp, which he is the lead lizard. He's the lead swamp thing, and he's just the world's best salesman. Seriously, making suckers out of them. Liz Cheney said, asked, "What did you make of Donald Trump's comment that this was a very loving crowd?"
Officer, now when you think about that and share with us the vivid memory of the cruelty and the violence of the assault that day, and then you hear former President Trump say, quote, "It was a loving crowd. There was a lot of love in the crowd." How does that make you feel?
It's upsetting. It's a pathetic excuse for his behavior, for something that he himself helped to create, this monstrosity. I'm still recovering from those hugs and kisses that day that he claimed that so many rioters, terrorists, were assaulting us that day. If that was hugs and kisses, then we should all go to his house and do the same thing to him.
Oh, my God.
To me, it's insulting, it's demoralizing, because everything that we did was to prevent everyone in the Capitol from getting hurt. And what he was doing, instead of sending the military, instead of sending the support or telling his people, his supporter, to stop this nonsense, he egged them to continue fighting. I was in the Lower West Terrace fighting alongside these officers. And all of them were telling us Trump sent us.
Trump sent us. Every officer, to a man, testified that the insurrectionists were there because they felt that Donald Trump told them to do this, invited them to do this. Donald Trump never came out of the White House that day to tell them to stop. When he saw that violence, he sat there and watched it on TV. Don't have time to listen to the live show? Want to hear more on your schedule? Go to randyrhodes.com and buy a stinking podcast.